Hello and welcome. Today's video will cover the M6 Railgunner in the hopes of fixing the problem of it being, or becoming, a catapult for your trooper. Today we will cover the disassembly, diagnosis and repair, and reassembly of the toy. This will be the first time I take apart this particular toy for this line. Together we can figure it out. To begin disassembly, simply pull apart the two end axles from the middle one, exposing the screws underneath. Remove the 4 screws and then hold the toy firmly in your hand and flip it back over. It looks like the top half of the vehicle is in one piece, including the driver hatch. You have to remove the cannon mount with seat to be able to pull through the top half of the vehicle. So what I can see here is I have a release switch with spring that fits into a groove. The spring is housed underneath the switch. It seems to interact with the brace. This brace must hold up the driver's hatch when the toy is in compact mode. The switch releases it as the hatch goes down, and then it becomes the driver's seat. Interesting. That brace also has a spring at the other end of it, or the other side of the toy. I'll put the switch and the spring aside, and then I'll remove this turret arm extension. It looks like the motor is within inside the assembly. I also can see a little bit of grime or oil at the bottom of the toy. Maybe somebody tried to oil it before. I see the gearbox. Let's try it out. It seems like the S-spring inside the gearbox is slipping. I can actually move the axle in and out of the housing. I shouldn't be able to do that. It looks like I'll have to rebuild this gearbox. Since this gearbox doesn't have a main spring and is only being used to reduce the motion within inside the toy, the main spring must be somewhere else. And there it is. The main spring is at the base of this turret extension arm. It also houses some parallel gears within it. On second thought, I'll put that aside and come back to it later. Let's go ahead and look at the way the main spring and the gearbox interact with each other. As I move this turret extension arm, I can feel it's a little rough, almost as if there's teeth missing. But I can't see any damage to the gears. And it looks like they interact well with each other. Maybe it's just the way the toy has to operate in order to slow the motion as it unfolds. I have this exact M6 toy here in the hopes of replacing or repairing the gearbox later, since it's totally shot. And I can tell that the turret arm, when it extends, it's very smooth on this particular toy. So there must be something wrong with the arm on the toy we're working on. Okay, let's get to work in trying to rebuild this gearbox. But first, I'm going to try and see if I can repair it using original parts. Let's see how that goes. Okay, I've removed the main gear and the old S-spring, and I'm going to replace it with this donor S-spring from a different gearbox. Looks like it might work. The only way to truly find out is to put the main spring back on and try and turn it. If it still slips, then it's no use. I'll have to use a new part. Okay, we're in luck. I found myself a new S-spring from a different project I was working on. Since I didn't use the S-spring, I just tossed it back in the bag, but we'll use it for this project. As you know, the new springs that I got from the wind-up toys that walk fit perfectly into the original housing for the Starcom toys. All I have to do is place gear 2 in the middle, and then I'll put the new S-spring with main gear above it, install gear 1, and then gear 3 goes right next to it. The C gear, which gives me a lot of trouble, will be the last one. Eventually I'll get it. As you can see here, as it's all assembled, the new S gear with main gear fits perfectly. Now all we have to do is install the housing divider, which sounds easier than what it is. Making sure that the side with the protrusions are facing you, place it on top of the gears, or the lower half of the housing. Now that I've straightened out gear 3 and the C gear, I can now put the housing spring cover and seal up the gearbox. Again, since there's no spring to this gearbox, we don't have to install one. As it is, this gearbox is kind of flimsy since it's old, but I'd like to try and keep it original as possible. I'm noticing now that it's not working correctly. I may not have put that C gear or caging gear in correctly, so I'll have to move it a bit so it interacts well with gear 2. I'm sorry, gear 1, or the spur gear. Now it works nicely. The next step is to remove the driver gear that was outside of the old gearbox. Since it's pretty well and firmly mounted on that axle, I'm going to have to hammer it out. Now, fitting the assembly back into the toy with the gearbox inside of it shows me that I have too much axle protruding from the assembly. So I'm going to shorten it up and see if I can fit it in there. Okay, now that the assembly fits, I now place that driving gear outside of the gearbox and get a good measuring of where it's supposed to be before I mount it. Since this new axle is just a micron smaller in circumference from the original axle that it had in it, I'm going to have to scratch the outside of it with a file so I can put some glue and then mount the gear on top of it. Since this is a robust gear, there's a lot more surface for the glue to adhere to it. Putting a small bead of glue onto the axle where you scratched it up, slide the driver gear on top with a twisting motion. When you feel the axle start to bond to the gear, you can then snap it to your desired position and it'll hold steady. Let's let that set for a while. Taking my magnifying glass, I'm going to look at this driver gear and make sure that the teeth are okay. I guess I should have done that before I mounted it. It looks okay. Now fitting it within the assembly, it all fits pretty well. I'm still a little bit worried about the turret arm extension or extender working a little rough, so I may have to use some oil just to loosen it up a bit, but that'll be later. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the glue to set, I'm going to go ahead and clean the bottom half of the toy from the gunk that's on the bottom. Not sure really what it is. Maybe oil or something. At least it'll be clean for reassembly. Okay, I think we're ready to put the rail gunner back together. Simply place the gearbox back into the lower part of the assembly. Keeping in mind not to move the turret extension arm It seems that that turret extension arm does have a little bit of trouble moving. I'm going to replace the spring now and put it in the groove, along with the release switch. Then we'll put the top half of the vehicle together, and then we'll see how that arm works. Once we finish assembling the toy. Uh-oh. It looks like I've made a mistake when I assembled the toy. The driver's hatch should lower significantly more than it is here. So that means the brace that holds it up when it's in compact mode is stuck underneath it. I'll have to disassemble the toy again and put it back the right way. I'll show you what I mean with these pictures. Okay, now I've got it down the right way. Holy cow. It really is rough to deploy. It seems like those gears at the bottom end of the turret extension arm need to be lubricated. Let's get that done. Just like on the toy before this one, the Laser Rat, I needed to rub a little bit of oil on the cannon for it to deploy correctly. In this case, I needed to rub some oil on the gears underneath the base of the turret extension arm, just to loosen them up. It seems to have worked. I think it's working just fine. This has been another successful repair. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.